Hey folks, I'm excited to explore and show you how to use some of the components on Bootstrap, and we're going to put together a responsive travel page. Now let's check out some of the popular travel pages that I have linked in this lesson, and I like to show them to students because they're able to recognize many of these elements. They see cards in many different websites, they see nav bars across many different sites. Again, same thing with this travel blog. A nav bar, you have cards, many elements that students are familiar with. And we're going to be able to build something very similar to this using Bootstrap's components. So, if you are ready, go ahead and make sure you have the Bootstrap Components template open, and let's just take a moment to check it out. So, it's really plain. All it has is just a little bit of styling. It has a heading that says Travel Page, and I've already linked to Bootstrap Style Sheet here, so that's been taken care of. What we want to do now is play around with cards. It's very popular and it's one that students love to use. So we're going to grab the card component from Bootstrap and bring it back to our travel page. Let's go to Bootstrap's documentation. We'll head to Docs, and in the side menu we will scroll all the way down to Components. Now there are several components that you're going to be able to play around with. We're going to check out cards. There isn't just one, there is multiple examples of different cards that you can use depending on whatever it is that you want to build. So some cards may have more content in them, and some cards may be very simple, just have text, or maybe don't even have a picture. Why don't we just check out this first card example, and we could always modify it later. So let's copy this, and we'll head back to our travel page. Not this one, right here. Now one of my biggest pet peeves is when we start dragging things from Bootstrap and my code looks like a bunch of mumbo jumbo because I didn't make comments to let myself know where one thing starts and where one thing ends. So right after the travel page, right before I paste my card, I'm just going to put a comment here that says card 1 because we are going to get 3 different cards, and I promise you it can get crazy with all the different divs that you're going to see on a page. So card 1 comment. And then after this card 1 comment, I'm going to paste my card. Now the indenting is always going to be a little bit funky, but we want to make sure that all the content inside this card is indented and nested in it. So highlight everything, and we will just press tab twice. We are officially indented. And the last thing I just need to fix is this closing div. Make sure it aligns with the opening div for the card. Alright, so we got card 1, but we're going to do 3 different cards. So right underneath it, I like breathing space when I code, so I'm just going to indent twice. Card 2, we're going to make another comment. And right underneath the card 2 comment, I'm going to paste the second card. Take some time to indent it and format things so everything looks nice and pretty, and I don't suffer later. Everything is nicely aligned. Alright, and then we're going to do one last card. So card 3. To turn it into a comment, I'm just highlighting and doing Command ? If you're using a Mac, or Control ? If you're on a PC. Alright, and we're going to paste the last card. Ooh, okay. I'm going to need to just indent it. And, alright, perfectly aligned. Let's check out what we have on the page. So, we're going to head back here and refresh our page. We got 3 cards. They are stacked right now, one on top of the other. They're stacked vertically, but what we want to do is use our knowledge of Bootstrap's grid system to put these 3 cards inside a grid. So let's head back to our code, and the first part that houses the entire grid is the container class. So right before card 1 starts, we're going to create a div, and we're going to give it a class of container, and we're going to put the closing div all the way at the end of the 3rd card. /div. Okay. And what we want to do is indent all 3 cards to make sure they're inside the container class. Alright. Okay, cool. We got all 3 cards inside a container. Let's check out what happens there. Alright, we see that there's a little bit of breathing space on the sides, which is exactly what we want. Now the last thing that we want to do, I lied, it's not the last thing. We're going to put all 3 cards inside a row, so that way we can get them to line up horizontally. So right after the container class, we're going to create another div. And we're going to give that div a class of row. And we're going to close it all the way at the end again of the third card, but right before the closing div for the container. I love to use the highlighting here, the highlighting syntax, to let me know like this is, because I haven't closed the div, so it thinks that this is the closing div for the row. But I'm going to put the closing div right before it. Okay. So this is now the closing div for the row, and this is the closing div for the container. All right. Do they line up horizontally? Let's find out. Yeah, they do. Now, the last piece that feels really important is to make sure that each one of them is given and wrapped in a column class to give them that breathing space away from each other. All right, so what we want is to wrap each one of these cards inside a column. So right before here, we're going to do another div, and we're going to give it a class equals column. We don't need to specify the column size for now. We can do that later. And because we want each one of these cards to be inside a column, so we're going to have to close the div right after card 1. Not sieve, div. Okay. And then we're going to just make sure to indent this inside. Nice. How pretty. We're going to do this again. For the second card, we're going to put it inside a div. That's a closing div. Class equals column. We're going to put the closing div at the end of the second card. Cool. And we're going to also give the last card a column. Div class equals column. Closing div. All right. This one ends here. Cool. So I'm going to put the closing div for it right after. Not div. Okay. I'm going to highlight all this, just make sure it's nested inside, and let's check out the results. Nice. So because we gave them a column class, they're all evenly spaced out across the row. The next thing that we want to do is customize these cards. We're building a travel page, so let's get some travel destinations on here. Let's head back to our code file and start customizing card 1. If you look around at the code here, there are spaces where we're going to need to fill in the blanks. Let's start with the image. Rather than having 3 dots for the source, let's specify a specific image that we want to render. In my file tree, I have an images folder, and in it I have 3 different images for my travel destinations. You could feel free to customize those later, but let's bring the image of Kenya and include it in card 1. So I'm going to need to specify the location here. It's inside the images folder, and it's a JPEG file, .jpeg. All right, and then you're really just going to do the same. You're going to fill in the blanks wherever there are blanks. So in the alt, I'm going to put Kenya. I'm going to change the card title and say that it's Kenya. And we've customized it enough that I'm curious to see what it looks like. Let's check it out. All right, so the rest is really the same. That's really the whole idea. You're going to keep this core intact, and you're just going to fill in the blanks wherever there are blanks. You can even customize it further, and if I don't want this button, I can just comment the whole thing out. Ooh, I see that it commented out the div. I'm going to have some issues there. So I'm just going to need to make sure I just highlight this. Yep. All right. So if I don't want the button, I could take out the button. It's my card. I get to do with it whatever I want. So what we just did for the first card, we're going to do for the second 2 cards. We're going to bring back the other 2 images here in the source. So here I'm going to put my image of Morocco. I'm just going to need to look at how it's spelled. Morocco.jpg. We're just customizing our cards. This is an image of Morocco, and my card title is going to say Morocco. It's an 1R. And do the same for the third card. Customize it for your last travel destination. What will it be? For me, that will be New Zealand. JPEG. I'm going to make sure to say the alt here is New Zealand. And I'm going to make sure to also change this card title and say it's New Zealand. All right, let's see. All 3 cards have been somewhat customized. It is a good start. So, what we just did with these cards is what you would do with any other component that you want. And the best way to use Bootstrap's documentation is to pull up any single component that you want. Let's say you wanted to use, buttons? Yeah, let's say you wanted to use and bring something like this back to your page. You would copy it, bring it back to your code file. And just one thing to note here is that these colors are actually pre-built into Bootstrap, and they're not really that customizable. So if you're not really feeling these colors and you want to add additional colors or just have your own custom colors for these buttons, you're going to need to do that in your own custom style sheet. And one of the best ways to do this is to give these elements an ID. And just to note, a lot of the classes that are used in Bootstrap are very, very strong and so precise. They're going to override any styling that you write. So adding an ID is a way to declare immediate importance to these styles. It feels right to pause the video right here to give you a chance to check out and play and drag and drop some of these components into your travel page. Some of the more popular ones tend to be the carousel and also the nav bar. So feel free to check those out and feel free to check out others and bring back to your page whatever feels right to you. In the next video, we're going to continue incorporating Bootstrap's grid system into our page and talk about the final piece, which is how to build responsive columns. Another thing that we also want to do is talk a little bit about how to customize some of the components, because it can get tricky sometimes with Bootstrap styling. So pause here, build on your travel page, check out Bootstrap's documentation for more components that you want to use, and once you've added a little bit more to your travel page and maybe customize it to have your own travel destinations, you can finally jump into the last and final video in this series.